Hello, I'm Jack Perkins. Welcome to Time Machine and welcome to Fenway Park, home of the Boston Red Sox. This is one of the oldest parks in the majors, but you know, it still looks pretty much as it did a half-century ago. Think about it. This is where, in 1941, Ted Williams batted .406. No one's done that since, probably never will. This is where, in 1946, the Red Sox met the Cardinals in the World Series, and they sure remember that around here. But in the years in between, the years 42, 3, 4, 5, World War II cast a pall over this place, as it did over every major league ballpark, because many of the game's biggest stars, Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Stan Musial, were off in the military. More than half of all major league players were in the service. Baseball took a backseat to freedom during the war, and in the next hour we will show you how the game was affected, and we'll show you the men who gave up some of their best seasons in the sun when baseball went to war. As a prelude to the war, we have the 1941 season, one of baseball's most historic. It was the year Joe DiMaggio incredibly hit in 56 straight games. And of course, the year Ted Williams hit .406. It witnessed the most famous strikeout in World Series history, the one Mickey Owen missed. And it was the year Lou Gehrig died. All of this took place against the distant backdrop of an approaching world war, one which seemed so far away to the players.
I never heard ball players talk about the war at all in '41. You get to read the newspaper or anything like that, but you always concern yourself with the baseball score, you know, yourself. But then you know you're getting pretty close to going, you know.
Are ready to kick off now. They've just scored. Ace Parker did it.
The uncertainty of the times quickly dissolved into harsh reality when a Sunday afternoon of football gave way to the announcement that from this point on, everything, including baseball, would be different.
He's up to the 25, and now he's hit and hit hard about the 27-yard line. Bruiser Kennard made the tackle. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Stay tuned to WOR for further developments, which will be broadcast immediately as received.
And they broke that game to announce that, and I guaranteed it sent chills right through me. I can remember that day. I'll never forget it.
December 7, 1941, the kind of day everyone remembers where he was.
I was at Balboa Stadium in San Diego watching San Diego Bombers play. The PA announcer asked all military personnel to report back to their bases.
I had parked my car in front of the Spanish club. I was going to the Spanish club to play dominoes and cards. And as I'm crossing the street, somebody says, "Did you hear Pearl Harbor was hit by the Japs?" I couldn't believe it. You know, I said, my God, how can they come all the way from Japan and hit Pearl Harbor?
It was a Sunday, and I was working in a department store. I had come home from baseball, and of course, in those days, you worked every winter, you know. You had to if you wanted to eat.
I heard on radio that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. I said, oh, hell, you know, here goes my baseball career.
I thought, uh-oh, you know, how long is it going to be before I'm infected? And, you know, I was just becoming 21 at that time.
And I was in Minnesota, and it's 4 or 5 hours, 7 o'clock. They just said they've announced that the Japs had hit Pearl Harbor. And at that time, I didn't, getting into the service wasn't paramount in my mind. Still, I wanted to play baseball for sure. Now, I was a little different Bob Feller. He joined up 3 days later, and off he was.
I had a radio on in my car. I was alone, and I was going to the Palmer House Hotel in Chicago to meet and sign my contract. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, there's a lot more important things going on right now. We're losing very big in Europe. We're losing very big in the Pacific. We just lost 3,000 men at Pearl Harbor that same day. And when he wanted to sign the contract, I met him that night at the hotel. I thought about it Monday, and I told him Monday that I was going to go over and joined the Navy first thing in the morning on Tuesday, the 9th of December.
Everybody knew we were in the war. It was a different kind of war. It wasn't Vietnam. It was a question of Germany, you know, to conquer the world. And there was no choice. Everybody joined up.
Hank Greenberg, now U.S. Army private number 36-114-611, goes to bat in his last big league baseball game for a year at least. And his final hit is a home run. Now it's goodbye baseball. Greenberg, once deferred for flat feet, spurns further deferment and says he's eager for camp and regular duty without special privilege. For Private Greenberg, it's a drop from baseball's highest paid performer at a cool $50,000 a year to induction as the U.S. Army's lowest paid performer at $21 per month. A rookie in this nation's most serious game.
It's hard to imagine today's ball players running off to war, but this was a different era, and so many young players were overwhelmed with patriotism.
When the war hit, your priorities went immediately into the service, and I couldn't wait to get in.
I didn't think I was indifferent from any other young man. I enlisted in the Air Force August 27, 1942.
When you're called up to protect what you have here, why, you're going to do it, just like anybody else. And I'm not going to say I was happy to do it, but you do it.
I never wanted to be a soldier, but, you know, my country was in trouble and everybody went in.
Well, not quite everybody. Some managed to create a little wartime controversy.
Ted Williams had received what was called a 3A deferment as the sole support of his mother. And there was some controversy over this.
I think I was as patriotic as anybody, but still baseball was paramount in my mind, too. Then, of course, in May of that year, I did sign up.
Joe DiMaggio also came in for some criticism. After the 1941 season, despite his 56-game hitting streak, the Yankees wanted to cut his salary. He was told by Ed Barrow, well, there's a war on, we can't pay you all of $37,500. And he held out during the spring training. And one day he got a telegram from a group of soldiers telling him, well, if you're not satisfied with the Yankees, why don't you join us in the service?
So he did, giving the regular GIs one more famous bunkmate.
You know, you'd talk to these GIs and they'd say, hell, I'm living in the same barracks with so-and-so. You know, rubbing shoulders with this and this guy and that guy. Never in the world they'd ever dream that would happen.
Everybody wanted to catch me aboard ship, so I played catch with everybody. Of course, a lot of baseball, they're still floating around out there in the Pacific that we threw overboard. They didn't quite catch them all. Besides, the ship would roll once in a while. I'd throw one over the catapults or over the fantail.
It was time for teammates to say goodbye, including one Washington senator who became a pilot.
Buddy Lewis, who was a fine infielder for the Washington Senators, and he was, while he was training as a pilot, he came back and buzzed his old teammates at Griffith Stadium.
And as he flew over the ballpark, he flew low. He told me, he said, I flew so low I could almost read the letters on their uniforms, and dipped one wing as a farewell salute to his teammates, and then headed up into the sky, and Lieutenant Buddy Lewis flew off to war.
And so, as the nation prepared for another world war, the question arose, should baseball even continue? The armed forces said yes.
Let's keep sports going. Give the boys in the bleachers overseas a break. We like to root and cheer for our favorites just like we did before the war.
Well, I see no reason why sports should be discontinued for the duration, because although we can't see the games out in the middle of the ocean, we get a kick out of hearing them.
While we have lost many of our star players, the armed forces overseas demand that we play baseball. The fans here in this country want to see our national game continue.
Baseball Commissioner Judge Landis wrote a note to President Roosevelt asking what he wanted to do about baseball. And Landis said that baseball was perfectly willing to carry on, but if Roosevelt felt that it was not appropriate for the game to continue, that they would shut down. And Roosevelt replied in what became known as the green light letter, giving baseball, in fact, the green light to go ahead.
People had to have some relaxation. They couldn't fight the war all the time. They had to think about something else once in a while, too.
A Gallup poll in 1943 showed that approximately 2/3 of those polled were in favor of baseball continuing. And interestingly enough, it seems that an even larger proportion of servicemen wanted baseball to continue.
Wounded GIs of Walter Reed voted in favor of continuing baseball, and the vote was 300-3. And one of the GIs came up with a terrific observation. He said, "This war is being fought for a lot of important reasons, and baseball is one of them."
When baseball went to war, we'll continue in a moment.
A recent Department of Energy study reveals that most American homes are under-insulated. And that means you. To find out what's right for your home, call Owens Corning at 1-800-GET-PINK.
Let's face it, dot matrix printers just don't fly anymore. After all, they're noisy, and they take up a lot of space. You see, Canon Bubble Jet personal printers give you a crisp laser quality.
Dot matrix prices!
Bubble Jet personal printers from Canon.
Please dispose of your old printer properly.
He was an ex-cop who made a mistake.
I did time on parole.
Now, he's an ex-con.
You're not a cop anymore.
On the case.
You're investigating the Claiborne girl's killing?
As a killer stalks a small college town.
I'd sure like to nail him. She was afraid the thief would try to blackmail her.
Burt Lancaster.
I might be able to bring in a killer if I knew what was on that tape.
When the clock strikes 12.
Somebody tried to kill him?
It may mean murder for the Midnight Man. Sunday on A&E.
They were strangers who shared a father.
He didn't tell you anything about me?
Annette O'Toole, Anthony Edwards, Unpublished Letters, Tuesday, October 22nd on GM Playwrights Theater. Brought to you by General Motors, putting quality on the road.
I want him to have a good time.
To me, safety's keeping out of an accident.
But I just want him safe.
You know when you slam on the brakes and the car all of a sudden has a mind of its own? With these GM anti-lock brakes, you can stop on a dime and steer while you're doing it.
You know, he's only 16.
We think quality starts with safety. That's why we have more models with anti-lock brakes than anybody else in the world.
GM safety. It's not one thing, it's everything.
Andy returns to When Baseball Went to War. The first full year of the war, baseball continued, but not as usual. Rationing had cut deep into equipment and the draft into lineups.
And in 1942, there were 100 rookies in the major leagues, the most in history to that point.
Up until that time, you knew most every pitcher you were going to face. Now there were some new faces that you had to kind of adjust to find out what you might be facing. And some pretty good pitchers had come in. You know, the guys could throw the ball pretty good.
The ball itself was a casualty, at least temporarily, of World War II, because rubber became so scarce.
They came up with a substance called balata, which came from tropical trees. It was not a strategic substance. And they put this in the baseball in the place of natural rubber.
It's remembered with no fondness at all by the players who played, who had to hit it.
When you hit that first pitch of the ball that looked round, it looked like an egg. It really looked like an egg because there was no more drive in it after that. And we were really using what we were hitting the balata ball, which would go puff, and that was it. You couldn't really drive that ball too far, right through the infield or for long distance.
I thought, man, you know, as good a ball as you hit, you thought it was out of the ballpark, and the outfielder would go out to the fence, and pretty soon he'd take 3 or 4 steps in and catch the fly ball.
So too did the tradition of keeping souvenir foul balls undergo a change.
Fans always threw back the foul balls because the balls were shipped to military bases for the American servicemen.
Occasionally there might be a fight, might break out in the stands if somebody didn't want to throw a ball back and another spectator was trying to get that fan to do his patriotic duty.
They played games at night and in the morning to accommodate the factory workers. Even the 42 All-Star game began at 6:30.
Polo Grounds, New York. More than 30,000 see the American and National Leagues clash, with proceeds benefiting our soldiers and sailors.
It began about 6:30 in the evening because night baseball had been cut off during the war years in New York City. The fear was that the lights from Polo Grounds and from Ebbets Field would silhouette ships in the harbor and make them easy prey for Nazi U-boats. It so happened that particular night a citywide blackout was set for New York, and the All-Star game ended around 9:30 in the evening, and just moments after it ended, all of the Polo Grounds and the rest of New York City went dark, and the players had to sit around for a while in the clubhouse waiting to get dressed because of the blackout.
The playing of the Star-Spangled Banner before games, an occasional occurrence to that point, became a ritual. And even the weather worked its way into the wartime equation.
The announcers were not allowed to describe the weather, whether it was raining or whether the sun was shining.
The feeling was that this could, enemy agents might pick up certain information about the weather, and perhaps if some bombing raid was contemplated, this would be of help to the enemy.
Diz Dean in St. Louis, he's broadcasting. You're not allowed to talk about the weather. And Diz says, folks, I ain't allowed to tell you why they're delaying this ball game. He says, but if you take a look outside, you'll find out.
Wartime restrictions also put a halt to the annual rite of holding spring training in Florida.
Travel restrictions were very unique. Commissioner Landis would not let any Major League Ball club train south of the Mason-Dixon line if they wanted to continue with baseball.
In turn, baseball offered a gift to the men serving overseas, a World Series highlight film, promoted by its biggest stars.
On land, at sea, and in the air, 170 American League players are serving the country. From the National League, 155 men have entered the armed forces. And to them and their fellow fighters overseas, Babe Ruth, the great Bambino who blasted 714 home runs in his Major League career, broadcasts a pre-game message.
Just to make sure you fellows don't miss baseball's classics this year, the American League is filing highlights of all the games. And we ship them all over and wrapped up in a package. I want to say from the bottom of my heart, and from the hearts of every American, that I want to say God bless you great men and women over there, and God bless the ones that are going over. And if we fight as half as hard as you're fighting over there, that American flag will fly forever.
Welcome to the Pacific, Joe. How'd you like your trip over?
Well, we had a little rough trip, but I rather enjoyed it. It's quite an experience.
Of course, even in the service, many ball players continued to do what they did best.
I was in the Navy, so I was sent to Hawaii, so we played a lot of ball over there. Something about the Navy, they if you're a ball player, they let you play ball.
The Army and Navy had baseball teams. They had an Army-Navy World Series in Hawaii in 1945. And some of the greatest names in baseball were on those teams because they were Major League Baseball players, and they were called from all over the Pacific and Europe to develop these teams and staff the teams.
We had full houses, and then when we'd play an all-star game, American National League team, we'd have so many people that couldn't sit down, and they'd be down each foul line, right and left field.
A whole company had to come over and march them over there whether they wanted to go or not, so they had to watch the game.
I played in Corpus Christi about 8 games. I saw one of the greatest games I ever saw, with Bob Kennedy playing shortstop and Ted Williams playing. And Ted Williams in that game is for the championship of the Navy. That game went something like 17 innings, and Ted Williams went 0 for 7 in the game. I imagine that was the only time in his life he ever went 0 for 7.
And we played in the ballpark at Rizal Stadium the Japanese had used for an ammunition dump. And the first time we saw it, the whole right field fence was shot up. There were bullet holes all over. The dugout was shot up. And I thought, man, this was 27 Yankees. Must have taken batting practice here. It was all beat up.
I knew a chief in the Seabees, and the Seabees built us a baseball diamond right on the white coral reef. And we took bomb crates and made bleachers, and we'd have 6, 8, 10,000 people every game.
There was 5, 8, 10,000 GIs watching a ball game.
big rain had come on, we still playing.
We had the Japanese soldiers, which was holed up in some of those hills. They came out and saw us play ball, didn't shoot us.
Even the Japs were crawling up on the left field fence watching us play ball. Can you believe it?
And I happened to be pitching against the 7th Air Force. I was a Class D pitcher. That's how I got my start as the Clown Prince of baseball. Joe DiMaggio hits a home run off me in this particular game. And would you believe it, from the pitcher's mound, and I've told this story 1,000 times and I've never been tired of telling it. It's like Sinatra singing a certain song. I'm the same way. I followed Joe DiMaggio from the pitcher's mound as he rounded first, stride for stride, around the bases. And as we came into home plate, his whole team came out of the dugout. And what do you think? They're shaking my hand at home plate, and Joe D is sitting in the dugout by himself with a smirk on his face, he told me later. And I tell Joe to this day, oh, I said, Joe, if it wasn't for me, nobody would have never ever heard of you, Joe.
Most of these players never saw a day of combat, but in a war with many jobs, they fulfilled their duty.
When I went in, I asked no favors. If they wanted me to clean a latrine, pull KP, I did it.
Can you imagine? Enos and them all doing KP and cleaning stoves and washing dishes at 9 o'clock at night on KP, so the GIs didn't have to do it?
Didn't have to shoot at anybody, because I don't think I'd have been too good at that.
I wasn't in any life-threatening situations or anything like that, except maybe a bad infield or two.
It was all right. Well, I would much rather have been in some duty in the States, but there was a hell of a lot better duty than some of the other people had, too.
How do you like playing for the Army, Joe? I don't mind it very much at all. As a matter of fact, I'm quite enjoying it. Although, I'm looking forward someday to getting back with the Yankees.
Time Machine will continue in a moment.
Your perception of German luxury cars is about to do a 180. The car 3 of Germany's top automotive publications chose as best in this class was neither Mercedes nor BMW, but the all-new Audi 100 V6. The all-new Audi 100, first at last.
From the first moment we set foot on the Cayman Islands, we knew that friendliness was a national trait.
The Cayman Islands.
When what you eat and drink upsets your stomach, you want a medicine that works directly on your stomach itself. Pepto-Bismol. As it coats, Pepto delivers powerful medicine directly to your stomach, right where you hurt. It's powerful relief. Pepto-Bismol. It's real medicine for your stomach.
I must be the greatest! I took up the world! I took up the world! Free at last! Free at last! Big stop! Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
As long as they keep making history, we'll keep writing their biographies. Peter Graves hosts the landmark television series, Biography, the stories of extraordinary lives. Tuesday, only on A&E.
Prodigy makes your PC a powerful tool.
And listen, there's even an encyclopedia.
Awesome. I do my shopping at home, pay my bills.
And I can learn something new.
Prodigy even has a 21-volume electronic encyclopedia that's updated quarterly.
All right, Prodigy.
Just press a couple of keys.
Prodigy connects your computer to sports, news, shopping, and an encyclopedia that never goes out of date, all for only $12.95 a month, including 30 messages.
You have just got to get this thing.
It's even got an encyclopedia. Prodigy.
In stores everywhere.
A&E returns to When Baseball Went to War. Not everyone from baseball was playing baseball in the service. Some saw battle action, and those stories aren't so fond.
When you're in service, you have some pretty grim experiences about suddenly, instead of working for a manager and trying to play baseball, now you're in a very, very serious proposition of preparing yourself for enemy encounter skirmish with someone else.
Most people like me were always frightened. You know, you're scared. You don't want to get killed, obviously. And, you know, when you're young, it's always the other guy. It'll be never you. You know, somebody else will get it. You'll never get it.
The island of Saipan, when I went there, was supposed to be secured. Well, we no sooner hit the beach, and they dropped that door from them big LSTs, and we didn't, myself, we didn't have the equipment to fight back and stuff, and we got run right back in the water.
We were involved in the breakthrough of the Germans in Belgium. And then actually my unit was surrounded by the Germans, so we were, you know, we were in a pocket in the Black Forest, and the Germans, when they made their breakthrough, had our equipment, our uniforms, even our dog tags. So that to show you how baseball is a part of Americana, the communication that we had among Americans was something like who played second base for the Bums. You know, the Germans knew about Brooklyn, they knew about New York and our lifestyle, but they didn't know our colloquialisms, and especially baseball. And I pity any guy who's an American soldier that wasn't a baseball fan, because now he's in deep trouble.
I was in the lead jeep of a patrol, and a sniper from a building shot from above, and the bullet went in the back of the steel helmet and came out the front of it, and it just scraped the helmet liner. And at the time, I just felt a tick. And I just slumped over like I was dead, and the driver went as fast as he could and went behind a building. And then when I looked up, they said, my God, he's still alive, because they thought the bullet had gone on through.
MacArthur used us in his Philippine operation. It was the first time that the Marines got into close air support. We would bomb ahead of the troops 100, 300 yards, which is fairly close when you get into that sort of stuff. And 7 squadrons in MAG 24 and 32 went to the Philippines with MacArthur, and we worked the whole strip, you know, from the Leyte, Mindanao, the Lingayen Gulf, and Luzon.
My unit captured the Remagen Bridge over the Rhine River, which probably shortened the war by several months. My assignment was to post guards on this bridge, and another officer and I were discussing where those people were supposed to be on the bridge. And this was like 1 minute of 4. My group was supposed to take over at 4 o'clock. And that bridge fell of its own accord because we had added too much weight to it. We were trying to get our equipment across that bridge to establish a bridgehead on the other side. And this was an old railroad bridge, and we added so much weight to it that the rivets popped out of that bridge, and it sounded like machine gun fire, really. And 1 minute later, I would have been on that bridge, so I felt like I was a pretty lucky guy.
Even the sacred baseball name of Babe Ruth was invoked by the other side as a battle cry.
Supposedly they would charge American lines yelling to hell with Babe Ruth, and Babe Ruth was asked about this, and he said, well, I hope that any, as he, in the vernacular of the day, said, I hope that any Jap who said that would be killed, and to hell with all Japs anyway.
The Japanese had cheered Ruth back in 1934 when he joined other players on a goodwill tour. Ironically, one player on that tour was already serving his country as a spy. Cleveland Indians catcher Moe Berg.
Moe Berg, of course, was an extraordinarily brilliant man. He was really just a journeyman baseball player. He went on a tour of Japan with a Major League All-Star team, and the story is that under the pretense of visiting someone at a hospital in Tokyo, he, when nobody was looking, he went up on the roof and for U.S. intelligence took photographs of the Tokyo skyline, and that those photographs were turned over to the War Department, and that they were later used in bombing raids of Tokyo.
We all knew that he was a smart guy,
and we all knew that he could speak a half a dozen languages.
He's supposed to have carried on some very important intelligence missions in Europe during World War II, and the extent of what he did is really not really known even today.
But spying and ducking bullets are two different things. And as most ball players who served discovered, regardless of your civilian job, war is hell.
Wasn't too happy in the service. Like I said one time, I said, if they let me out, I'll send them a check every month for what they're sending me.
It's an experience, but it's an experience you can live without.
I hate war, I'll tell you that. I think it's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. That innocent lives have to be so wasted.
I'm no hero. The heroes didn't come back. The heroes are still on the beaches at Omaha Beach and in Europe and the depths of the Pacific and the Atlantic, on the islands in the Pacific. They're the heroes. The ones that returned, like myself, no hero, did the job.
When baseball went to war, we'll continue in a moment.
A recent Department of Energy study reveals that most American homes are under-insulated. And that means you. To find out what's right for your home, call Owens Corning at 1-800-GET-PINK.
They were strangers who shared a father.
He didn't tell you anything about me?
Annette O'Toole, Anthony Edwards, Unpublished Letters, Tuesday, October 22nd on GM Playwrights Theater. Brought to you by General Motors, putting quality on the road.
A baby changes everything.
Safety takes on a whole new meaning when it's somebody you love in that car. This is our family. They're the most technically advanced and lifelike dummies in the world. Only GM uses a family like this to develop safety technology because we know quality cars, safe cars, should help protect everyone. I look at my family and I want us to be thinking of everything.
GM safety. It's not one thing, it's everything. She's everything to me.
From that vault, nobody will get hurt.
Walter Matthau is on the lam and running for his life when he's Charlie Barrick. Saturday on A&E.
Late night. To you, it's just a TV show. To us, it's a living hell.
It's a TV viewing experience.
Weeknights at 7 Eastern on A&E.
He's the Robin Hood of the art world. What? Out to redistribute the wealth. The free antique valuation scam. An expert at running a car. Late Regency. Very late. Should have been done this week. Or ruining one. Well, as Nelson said, gotta have an eye for it. Who knows if something's real, fake, or framed? Why would the police have been here? Because they're after you. But it's usually Lovejoy who cracks the case. Lovejoy, a true original, Monday on A&E.
A&E returns to When Baseball Went to War. As the war progressed, it took its toll on the country and on baseball.
It was an inferior product, of course, but it was relative, meaning, you know, it's you get two kid teams playing. If they're pretty equal, it can be an interesting game.
We did the best we could, what we had at that particular time. And at that particular time, it was the best available.
It seemed like it was good baseball. You know, you still had enough players that were left playing, and it wasn't like maybe a really top major league type of baseball.
They gave a lot of players that didn't exactly have major league talent a chance to play in the major leagues. I think that was a big thing. Of course, the caliber wasn't quite as good.
As the war progressed, there was a desperate search for bodies. The St. Louis Cardinals put out an advertisement in the Sporting News looking for ball players.
It was a case where the old expression, you can't tell the players without a scorecard, didn't even apply, because sometimes you couldn't tell the players with a scorecard. They were here today, literally here today and gone tomorrow. There was a wide range of players who played during the war. Some of them were too young for the draft, like Joe Nuxhall at age 15, pitching for the Cincinnati Reds, all the way up to the other extreme with Hod Lisenby, a man named Hod Lisenby, who was pitching for the Cincinnati Reds in 1945 at age 47. Hod Lisenby was born during the Spanish-American War. Jimmy Fox became a pitcher at the end of his career during World War II. Pepper Martin came out of retirement and played. But on the other hand, there were some quality ball players who played before the war, during and after the war. So that it wasn't just like a circus sideshow, although there is that tendency, I think, to feel that it was. But many of the players were, as a matter of fact, 4Fs, meaning they were physically deferred from military service or they were too old or too young.
So depleted were the baseball ranks that even the St. Louis Browns, one of the worst teams in baseball history, managed to win a wartime pennant.
The Browns' only pennant in 1944, the only year they ever won it, was due in some part to their luck in the draft.
They had 18 4Fs on that ball club and 2 fellows who had been discharged from military service. So you're talking about 4 out of every 5 ball players were either 4F or had been discharged from the armed forces. So by virtue of their having more 4Fs than anyone else, they struggled their way to a pennant.
I remember listening to the '44 World Series, the Browns and the Cardinals, and names you're saying, wow. I mean, if it was today, you'd probably find them on the side of a milk carton. I mean, you know, they were lost for many years, and all of a sudden they're in the big leagues.
Gutteridge, second base. Queevich, center field. Labs, left field. Stevens, shortstop. Moore, right field. McQuinn, first base. Chrisman, third base. Hayworth, catching, and Galehouse, pitching.
With this group of no-names, the Browns lost the World Series. 1 year later, they broke camp with Pete Gray.
Pete Gray had lost his right arm in a childhood accident. Played minor league baseball despite this disability.
He batted .320 at Memphis the year before the Browns brought him up in 1945. The fact that he played 1 inning in the major leagues is a miracle.
It's pretty tough playing up there for a fellow with 1 arm anyhow. You know, them pitchers are a little better than the minor leagues.
He got up, I believe it was 234 times, and he hit .218. He had very little power, but I mean, even so, this was just an extraordinary feat.
I know I was pretty thrilled to get there, to get a chance at it. You know, it was pretty hard for me to get in organized baseball.
Another inspirational story from '45 was that of the Washington Senators' Bert Shepard.
I was a P-38 pilot, which I enjoyed flying. That's the most fun I ever had. I still thought about baseball because when I was over in England flying combat, I still managed a baseball team. And I got shot down on the opening day. I was strafing over in Germany, going into Strafen Airfield about 20 feet off the ground. They shot the right foot off, and then I got hit in the chin, which caused me to slump over the controls. And so I crashed doing about 380 miles an hour. The Germans later told me the airplane exploded and burned. And I woke up in a German hospital 3 or 4 days later, and they had the leg off and the head sewn up. I had a full fracture of the skull, and I have a plate over the eye here now. But I was pretty well banged up. I got a crude artificial leg after I'd been in prison camp about 3 months. And I practiced throwing on that and running on it and pivoting and so forth. So when I got back to the States on a prisoner exchange in February of '45, and I went to Walter Reed Hospital.
Lieutenant Shepard had a jauntiness in his step and manner when he walked up to the receiving ward at the Walter Reed General Hospital.
I got a new leg March the 10th.
This is the new leg that Bert had been counting on to take him back to normal living. Ever since the day he woke up in that German prison hospital.
Secretary of War Patterson called some of the prisoners of war down to his office to find out how we'd been treated and so forth, to make a press release. So he asked me what I want to do, and I said, I want to play baseball. He said, well, you can't do that, can you? I said, yes, I can. So he called up Mr. Griffith, and he said, we've got got a fellow here that's come back from prison camp and lost a leg and says he can play baseball. Can you use him? Mr. Griffith said, well, send him out just to be kind, see?
Washington signed Shepard as a coach, but he soon got to live out his dream.
We were getting beat pretty bad by the Boston Red Sox, and I said, well, maybe this is my chance. There was 2 out in the 4th inning, and I came into the bases loaded and struck out George Metkovich. And then I allowed 1 run and 3 hits the rest of the ball game.
During the war, women helped fill the gaps left by the men fighting overseas. And in the Midwest, they did so in baseball as well.
Each club had lost some players, and Wrigley in Chicago, he said, gee whiz, we got to keep baseball going some way, and he hired a women's team. He organized a women's professional baseball team, not softball, baseball team. They played a regular season and had maybe 6 clubs. And
the chance to have this great opportunity to become sort of famous in a small way is just, I can't explain immeasurably. It was if I was a hero or heroine.
In 1945, the first of baseball's wartime heroes began to return. And some, like our old friend, the Washington senator turned pilot, Buddy Lewis, had a few surprises waiting for them.
Caldwell threw 2 pitches that he thought were right, and Buddy Lewis told me, in fact, were right down the middle. He said they were perfect pitches. Well, he wanted to get a look at a couple pitches, not having seen one in the 4 years, so he let them both go by for what he assumed were strikes. But Bill McGowan called each of those 2 pitches a ball. And Earl Caldwell came charging down off the mound and halfway to home plate with his hands on his hips, and he said to McGowan, what in the world's going on back there? Those pitches are right down Broadway. And McGowan said, son, this is Buddy Lewis. It's his first time back since he went away to war, and there ain't no way you're going to throw a strike.
Most returning players were a little rusty, but some didn't miss a beat.
Hank Greenberg came up and hit a Grand Slam home run just back from the war, the last Grand Slam home run of his career, to win the pennant for the Tigers and get them into the World Series against the Cubs. Warren Brown was a very respected baseball writer in Chicago, was asked which team he thought would win the World Series, and he said, I cannot conceive of either team possibly winning even 1 game.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Western Allies, receives the greatest ovation. He personifies victory in the bitter war against the brutal Nazi enemy. Now to the baseball part. Typical and most American of this commander, his one request was that he be taken to the ball game. The nation's #1 fan. The general tells how before he went to West Point, he was for a while a baseball player. So he knows about hits, runs, and errors.
Ike's parting comment after the game, what the hell has happened to the pitching since I went away to war? Time Machine will continue in a moment.
For 150 million years, they were the absolute rulers of the Earth. Now available for the first time on video cassette, A&E's epic miniseries, Dinosaur, the biggest story ever told. Hosted by Walter Cronkite, this spectacular journey through time is a wonderful gift and a true collector's item. This 4-part deluxe box set is yours for only $69.95 plus shipping and handling. To order, call 1-800-423-1212.
For years, the German motoring press has ranked Mercedes and BMW ahead of Audi. But recent tests conducted by 3 of that country's top automotive publications reverse that order. The car they put at the head of this very impressive class was the all-new Audi 100 V6. For your copy of the test that put Audi first, call 1-800-4AUDI.
There's a place in Louisiana that's almost more European than American. They call it New Orleans. Louisiana, we're really cooking. Give us a call.
Open that vault, nobody will get hurt.
The cops want him.
Well, we're gonna get him.
The mob wants him.
Where's the money?
Dead.
This stuff belongs to the mafia. This is gambling money, skimmed off the top. All I wanted was small take, no big deal. Nobody takes the mafia for this kind of money and lives to tell about it.
Walter Matthau was on the lam.
I'd rather have 10 FBI's after me.
With nowhere left to run.
The mafia kills you. They'll never stop looking for you.
When he's Charlie Barrett. Saturday on A&E.
Before the conclusion of our program, let's see what Bill Curtis has coming up on investigative reports. Bill.
Thanks, Jack. Join me for a fascinating series regarded as the most detailed investigation into the mysteries surrounding the death of JFK. The Men Who Killed Kennedy on Investigative Reports next.
And now back to our program. A&E's Time Machine returns to when baseball went to war.
When the bomb was dropped, well, I got a battlefield commission because of the Remagen Bridge thing. And I debated about taking it, and I thought that, okay, I'm going to take it because I'd rather go over to Japan to fight the Japanese as an officer. I'd have a better chance of coming back alive as an officer. And I never dreamed that we were going to drop that bomb. And yet my wife was working for DuPont, and she knew that we had that bomb, but she couldn't tell me because that's security.
We were in the atomic bomb group. And that Friday night, this chaplain comes up. I'm writing my wife a letter. The chaplain comes up and says, hey, the war is going to be over tomorrow. I said, what do you mean the war is going to be over tomorrow? He said, we're going to drop the atomic bomb on them. I said, well, what kind of bomb? Atomic bomb.
They flew the first atomic bomb off of Tinian where I was. I said, if I'd known that thing was there, I would have asked to move to another island.
I had my orders, and I was on my way to the South Pacific when the war did end. And again, that was, I was lucky that I didn't have to go into combat.
They were preparing to go into Tokyo, and the general there said, Pee Wee, I know you're not a Marine man. They had sent me over to kind of set up athletic programs because they had come back from Iwo Jima. And he said, we may take you into Tokyo with us we go in. I said, you don't have to, really.
The end of the war, much like the beginning, was a moment captured in time, forever to be remembered.
It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was in Honolulu. Bob Lemon, I was bunking close to him. He come up and shook me. He said, get awake, the war's over. So we'll go back home now.
When it was declared, I had a bottle of Irish whiskey saved up for it. And it says, what a celebration we're going to have here.
September 2nd, you know, that year. And of course, I'd have to say that's one of the happiest days of my life. You know, like you say, you don't want to be over there. And you were going home.
After war, the players had a new appreciation for their job.
When I came back, I felt like, wow, what a great way to make a living. You go out and get your hands and face dirty in your uniform and sweat, and then have the opportunity to take a shower and put your clothes on. You know, in the service, we went for like 2 and 3 months without a shower, and the scared kid that was there in 42 was now feeling pretty comfortable because I knew that if I didn't do well, they weren't going to shoot me, that they were going to bring a relief pitcher in. You know, that was the difference.
I think I was more mature after spending that much time aboard ship and in the war, and it changed a lot of the outlook on life and so forth. Baseball was still important, but it wasn't as important as it was when you're a kid before the war, it became less important to me. It's only a game. And anyone that says that you're playing sports is like being in a war, I got news for them. They'd never been in a war.
But not all could madly dash back to where they were, for baseball skills had been eroded.
The boys come back, then they had to get back in the groove, you might call it. They had to readjust themselves, and some of them couldn't because they had defects. Something happened to them.
When I came back, you don't know what the heck shape you're in. DiMaggio didn't have a good year. He didn't have a bad year. He didn't have a usual DiMaggio year.
But I just fell flat in my face. I don't know what happened. I just lost everything.
DiMaggio really was never the same player. He only had one big year after the war, 1948.
I never got back in stride after that. I had 1 year, the first year I was back, 1946, I had a decent year. But I could still see where I lost a step going after ground balls, and I lost a step on balls I hit, stuff like that.
I was starting all over. I was 35 years of age. I had a sore arm, and it wasn't very appropriate equipment to try to come back with.
It cost, I think, a Hall of Fame probably election, so far at least, is Cecil Travis, the Washington shortstop, who was second in hitting the year Ted hit 400, was a real good hitting shortstop third baseman who came back from the Battle of the Bulge with frozen feet.
That's the thing I think that people have forgotten, how many guys really gave up careers, and you say, well, they were lucky they didn't get killed. That's true, because a lot of guys did get killed.
And for some, there would always be the haunting question, what might have been?
You take guys like the Schoolboy Rose and the Williamses and Billy Hermans and all those guys, they lost valuable time that they can't get back age-wise.
Those were my, so to speak, peak years, and I lost them.
I've often wondered, Ted Williams, what kind of records, Bob Feller, what kind of records would they have had they not been interrupted?
The 3 years I lost is the only thing that you can say. Hell, it was 9 billion guys that did, contributed a lot more than I did.
I never heard Ted say, well, it's a lousy deal, this and that. It was something that he accepted, and then having to go back into the Korean War, he lost 5 of his peak years. And if you take the amount of home runs he hit average per year, he probably would have ended up with 700 home runs or more.
Oh, I didn't begrudge going in service. I did my duty. I served my country the best I could.
I'm very proud of my military career. And that's more important to me than if I had 100 more wins or 1,000 or 1,200 more strikeouts and more no-hitters. Oh, no. I've made some bad decisions in my life, but the one I made on December 9th is not one of them.
And in the aftermath of war, there was a positive, as baseball made the decision to integrate the game.
I had seen these black boys offering to fight and die for the freedom of the country all around the world. And then when he came back home, they were told he couldn't play the national game. I just didn't think it was fair, and I didn't think it was just and decent. And I told Ricky, I said, bring him on in and we'll make the fight.
They had to sign a Jackie Robinson or somebody because World War II had depleted the ranks of Major League Baseball. They'd taken away the Musials and the DiMaggios, and all those guys went into the service. And when they came back, they weren't the same ball players. And baseball was really, Major League Baseball was in dire need of a spark. Jackie was just what the doctor ordered to become the first black to play in the major leagues.
More than 500 major league players and some 4,000 minor leaguers served in World War II. And of them, only 2 did not return. They were Elmer Gideon, who played briefly for the Senators, and Harry O'Neill, who played 1 game for the Athletics. For all the rest, there isn't even a footnote.
In all the encyclopedias I know, it rarely ever says in any particular year that you're in military service. There's a blank there. I don't really resent it. I think it should be in there. I think I asked somebody one time, I said, why don't they change the book? And the person I asked, I won't reveal his name, said it might be an inconvenience to the publishers. I said, do you think it was an inconvenience for these fellows to spend 3 or 4 years in the military service? That was an inconvenience. The publishers should have it in their books. That's part of history.
The baseball season of 1946 was the first complete season in peacetime in 5 years. And on opening day, the Stars were back in force. Bob Feller pitched a shutout that day. Hank Greenberg and Joe DiMaggio had home runs. Ted Williams hit the longest ball seen in Washington's Griffith Stadium in 15 years. It went 440 feet. Baseball in those years, right after the war, seemed to symbolize normalcy, a return to life as it had been before Pearl Harbor. And the performances of the Stars on opening day of 46 seemed to prove that we could go home again. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jack Perkins, and this has been Time Machine.